Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended Podcast, and founder of the Blended Pledge. And I'm really excited to be partnering once again with the team at Manhattan Associates. Now, we've recorded 4 episodes together for Let's Talk Supply Chain, and we have been diving into a range of subjects from supply chain unification to planning and forecasting. And this is our second LinkedIn Live together. So if you missed any of our discussions so far, just search Manhattan on the Let's Talk Supply Chain website to find out all the great content and dive in and learn a little bit more about the conversations that we've been having around unification, planning, and forecasting. So now it's time to bring Bryant up to the stage. It's so great to see you again. I feel like we've done so much together this year.
I know, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. I think we're going to have a great conversation again, just like we had in the past.
Yeah, I can't wait because today we're talking about transportation management. Now, transportation really is the backbone of supply chain, but it's becoming a little bit more, increasingly difficult. Disruptions, cost, legacy tech, customer demands. Businesses are struggling to juggle all of it and make smart decisions. But Manhattan is here to help. And today we're going to be exploring the future of TMS and how supply chain leaders can prepare for rising complexity, capacity challenges, which I think is top of mind, and sustainability demands by moving to cloud-native unified solutions. We're going to be taking a closer look at the risks of siloed systems, legacy technology, the power of AI, automation, and optimization in future-ready TMS. And one last thing, how unifying transportation, warehousing, and yard actually creates you a competitive advantage. So remember to let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We want to give you a bit of a shout out. And if you have any questions throughout the show, make sure to put those in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. If you like the conversation, if you're loving the conversation, make sure to send us a fire emoji through the comments as well, because we love to see the fire emojis. Now, Bryant, back to you. Can you introduce yourself, maybe a little bit about your background, and give us an overview of Manhattan, like who you are, what you do, and how you help your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with myself. So I'm Bryant Smith. I'm a product manager at Manhattan Associates. I'm responsible for managing our TMS application. So think about the product roadmap and strategy and the types of things that we want to build in the product, working closely with our customers and stakeholders. For Manhattan as a whole, we're a supply chain technology company. So we offer capabilities around order management, warehouse management, yard management, transportation management, but also supply chain management as well. So got you covered on all things supply chain.
Well, and we've spoken about most of those things, I think, on the different shows that you've been on. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, we did a live from the floor at Manhattan Momentum. That was a lot of fun as well. And so we've done this a couple of times, but I don't think we've particularly focused on this particular topic. And so I'm excited to bring it to the audience today.
Yeah, and you know what? We could talk for days about this topic, but we only have just a short, precious time, so we'll try to cover as much as we can.
Yeah, we're going to do that right now. So, as I said in the intro, transportation has got, more and more complex. There's lots of moving parts. There's lots of things to think about. Technologies in there. What do you think are some of the biggest factors impacting businesses right now?
Oh boy, where do you start? I mean, supply chain, transportation, logistics have the traditional problems of, weather events and traffic and, all these things that would just play into daily operations. But like even over the last couple of years, that has been highlighted by some major, major events. And even today, if you think about just like the regulation, the legislation, the tariffs, it's like, it just adds a whole nother layer of things that people need to pay attention to, which is impacting their operations. And then it has like a downstream effect, right? Is now the consumer behavior is changing, right? Do they want to spend as much as they used to? Or do they want to start saving a little bit more, hedge their bets? So if you think about how you're going to serve your customers, it's not even predictable anymore. You can't even have an accurate forecast of your sales because you don't know whether people are going to be investing in your products or not, or if they're going to be holding off and saving up and stocking on toilet paper and canned goods.
Toilet paper, water. People, and it's actually kind of funny. I was talking to somebody in Florida just earlier, and she was like, us Floridians, we hear hurricane, we don't really even move. It's only the people that have just moved here that goes and gets all the toilet paper. But it's a very, very real thing for a lot of people, and especially a lot of businesses. And I think it's been hard. They've tried to keep up, firefight, but that's led to a couple of really core problems. The first one that I see and that we talk about a lot is silos. And how has that, disjointed, reactive rather than proactive approach created the fragmentation that we see now? Like, I feel like we've been talking about silos for so long, a number of years. We're still talking about it today. Do you think it's getting worse?
Yeah, we just talked about the problems that people have to face. And when you're dealing with technology that is siloed, it almost just amplifies the problem. If you don't have technology to help you with your problems, then what good is it? And, we've seen the silo effect just take a snowball effect on some of these problems. You're really going to have to, if you have silos today, you're using different solutions for different things. And you often have to either integrate those systems so that they can talk to one another. But the problem is, they go through different upgrade cycles. So application number 1 upgrades in the fall, and then application number 2 upgrades in the spring. And how do you keep them compatible with each other? And the integration breaks, and there's a lot of overhead. And, it makes the problem worse. And they spend more time fixing their old technology than actually focusing on the real world problems that they're trying to solve. So it's kind of a detractor in that way rather than an enabler. So the silo effect just does not help anyone. And I'm surprised we're still talking about it here in 2025. It's been something we've been talking about for a while.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. And I think about, in my business, when you talked about updates, it made me think about updates on the website. And how when an update on the website and you've got integrations and plugins maybe, or you've got, a different server or things like that, when the update it happens, all these other things could happen, but you might not realize until a week or 2 later. And you're like, wait a second, why is that page not working properly? And then you're like, oh, that update happened, but it didn't trigger an update for the plugin that was needed to make sure that it continued to work. And so, when you said that, and I was thinking about real world challenges with that, you can really take a look at something like a website update. So easy, but that's what translates into business right now. And I think also, working in silos, like you were talking about, it creates a lot of distrust and a lot of mistakes, right? If you're having to upload and download or move information from here to there could be some mistakes that happen within that data, which means that the data that maybe you cleaned up the other day is no longer clean and no longer usable, right?
Yeah, not only that, it's not even real time, right? You're having to transfer data from one to another, and it's being transformed, and as you said, it's being manipulated in that way. But the time that you actually get the data, the end user is actually doing something about it, it's probably too late, right?
Yeah.
If you had a late shipment and you found out, X amount of time later, you probably already missed that delivery or missed your chance to reschedule an appointment or whatever the case may be. So even with that effect, you're really losing a lot of valuable time. And, at least in our world for transportation, time is of the essence almost all the time. On-time delivery and on-time performance is, one of the main drivers. And if you're not on time, you're creating a lot of costly mistakes.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking that there's just so many different things that you have to think about too. Why do you want to have to think about making a mistake in getting the information too late? And that could actually, it could involve costs, like additional costs, like demurrage, detention. Like I'm thinking ocean freight, right? Because that's where my mind goes.
Yeah.
Because when I was in logistics, it was mostly around ocean freight. And you were saying, if I get the information a week later, what does that mean? Well, that could mean additional costs that you could have completely avoided. Now, one of the other things that you mentioned was aging technology. Now, that's the second one. That's the second core problem that we want to talk about, because technology is moving so quickly. Many organizations have just been adding new things on top of a stack, right? And I think about the tech stack just like this, instead of starting from scratch. So what do you see? What do those outdated systems kind of look like? And why is that tech stack so important?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Tech stack was supposed to be a positive, but actually what it's turned into is quite a negative, as you're actually stacking technology on top of each other. And the resulting implication is essentially you have this giant monolithic system that doesn't allow you to be agile with your supply chain. And we all know that things change in an instance within supply chain. If you're working with a monolithic system, you're already kind of behind the curveball. But if you think about that, and they need to go through the upgrades, what we were just talking about is, in most situations, they have to bring that application down to go through scheduled maintenance, right? As we have to fix bugs, we have to add new capabilities, we have to add new technology. Well, all the while, this system is down. You can't even use it because they're going through that upgrade. So what are you doing? You're going back to phone calls. You're going back to Excel sheets, and you're just making the problem even worse. Is these old technologies are really holding you back and now allowing you to progress for the future. And you had talked about costs. It's not only the cost of administration, but the cost of upkeep, the overhead, and all those types of things, just because your technology is old.
Yeah. Well, and nobody wants to go back to phone calls. Nobody wants to be on the phone. I keep getting a text. Why are you calling me? Why can't you just text me? You know what I mean? We've got that generation. Nobody wants to go back to phone calls.
My voicemail message is, why did you leave me a voicemail? It could have been a text.
I need to adopt that. Remind me never to call you. All right.
Okay.
So, what do you think are some of the risks? Because there's a lot of risks out there right now. And I always tell people you're never necessarily going to make the optimal right decision in every single moment when there's risk involved. But you can decide where you want to spend your risk dollars, and you can decide what is the right solution or answer in that moment. So what are some of the risks inherent in working with those siloed systems and legacy tech? What does it do for businesses? We've talked about, you've mentioned cost, right? We've kind of mentioned cost. What are some of the other risks that businesses take?
Yeah, so the obvious one is cost, right? And that's where people naturally go to. But the one that kind of is just as important that people don't naturally go to is service. You need to think about how you're servicing your customer. There's a whole thing called on time in full. Is if you're not getting the things where they need to be on time and how people expect it, not only are you creating a bad customer experience, and your customers might go find another supplier or another vendor. You're creating those bad relationships. So not is there actually a physical cost to making bad decisions, you're impacting the customer experience as well. So it's something that kind of flies under the radar in most cases.
Yeah, well, and I also think it makes it hard to understand the cost to serve that customer too.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about service, but then there's also a cost to serve and service that customer that sometimes gets lost in translation if you don't have the visibility into all of the information or the data that you need to figure out what it is to cost, like what the cost is to serve that customer.
And I'll give you one more risk that people don't think about. So we had talked about cost, we had talked about service, but the other thing is your competition. If you're going to continue to use old technology and your competitors are leveraging newer technology, they already have a leg up on you from a competitive advantage standpoint. So if you want to continue to be competitive in your space, in your industry, you want to make sure your technology is not holding you back. You want to make sure it's giving you an advantage.
That is so true. We definitely don't want technology holding us back. I mean, most of us can't hold on for what's propelling us into the future. So if you're doing that, there's a big problem. All right. So businesses need to tackle all of this and prepare for the future, like you just said. So when we think about organizations prioritizing or modernizing outdated transportation systems, why is that so important? I mean, you talked about the risks.
Yeah, so a number of reasons, right? We had talked about, but what I would recommend is the best place to start is evaluate your current state, is understand where are your pain points. Are
Mhm.
your pain points related to older technology or architecture? Are your pain points related to outdated technology? Are your pain points related to communication, or is it visibility? Is it data? Where are those pain points that exist within your operations today? That's kind of the first step, is knowing what's the problem. The second step, at least in my opinion, is you need to determine what is your end state and what are your goals and objectives. Where do you want your business to be 5 to 10 to 15 years out in the future? What are those goals? So
Mhm.
once you've established point A, where am I today? Point B, where do I want to be? Now you can start plotting the course on how to get there. Now, the technology is kind of a means to an end. So, you can go through the process of technology evaluation and providers and vendors and those types of things. But keep in mind, those technologies are supposed to help you get to where you want to go. So, at least that would be my advice.
Yeah, well, I like the one that you said was, what does success look like?
Mm.
Right? Sometimes we forget to ask that question. Because once we understand what we want success to look like and where we want to get to, then we can really take a look at what those measurements are to success. So, 3 months from now, if we look to implement this to solve for this problem, what does success mean to us? And what's the measurement of success? Because we really have to get an understanding of the measurement versus what we want that to look like. If we don't know what it looks like, then how do we ever know? Like, I feel like we're just in this, like, vicious cycle.
Now, how do you measure success? Right? Is how do you know you've achieved success?
Mhm.
It's and that ultimately plays into your return on investment, but it also plays into your cost benefit analysis, right?
Mhm.
And any decision you make, there's a cost and a benefit, right? But if you don't know what your costs are and you don't know what benefits you're going to get, how can you possibly make that decision?
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about ROI,
Yeah.
that doesn't and that's the return on investment, that doesn't always mean money in your pocket though, right?
Right. That's why they don't call it money on investment. It's a return, right? Is
Okay.
returns can come in a number of different ways, right? You can have cost savings, you can have time savings, you can have improved experiences, improved relationships. Those are all things that are in play when you start modernizing your technologies.
So let's talk about practical strategies, right? Because we all talk about, success looks different for other people, but I want to know practical modernization strategies. What does that look like in the short term? Like, what should I be striving for in the short term? But what does that look like longer term as well?
Yeah, so if we take the two principles that we had talked about, the cost and benefit, when you're evaluating your current tech stack or your current landscape of technologies, what does that cost look like to you today? I mean, are you paying a licensing fee? Are you paying some type of server costs? Is there overhead? What does that cost look like? And in return, what kind of benefit are you getting? Are you
Mhm.
getting advanced visibility? Are you getting better route generation? Are you getting better carrier contract negotiation? Understanding that is kind of step one. You need to know what your baseline is, right?
Mhm.
And then you can start going into, well, how do these new technologies that are available, i.e., machine learning, predictive ETAs, generative AI, these new technologies that exist, they will come at a cost. Yes, there's a cost to implement them. There may be a cost to continued use, but the benefits will far outweigh the costs that exist with those technologies, because they're going to have a step change within your organization and change exactly, how users are interacting with data. What type of integrations do I need to have? What processes can I automate where I can free up these resources to do more strategic things rather than the mundane? So those are all strategies that a company could use today.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that I mentioned at the beginning was this idea of cloud native. Now, we've been hearing these words a little bit more often. I'm not entirely sure why, and maybe you can help me out with that one. But Manhattan does believe that moving to cloud native unified solutions is part of the key to that success. So, what is cloud native? Talk to me about that. And what does a cloud native TMS look like? Like, why is that so important?
Yeah, so I'll kind of bring you on the journey of how this came to be for a lot of different companies. Is at first, companies would build software and then they would allow you to install it on premise. So you could
I
use this.
remember that. Okay. We had a server room
Yes.
and we had an IT guy and then we had a director of an IT and then, there was the server room and, nobody really understood any of it.
Exactly. And then we said, well, you don't need your server room. You can use our server room. And this is how
Okay.
you got SaaS applications.
All right.
So you didn't need to host it on your servers anymore. We would host it for you. Well, nobody wants to do that either. There's too much overhead and maintenance for everyone involved. So we said, let's go to the cloud, which now you have like Google Cloud. You also have Amazon Web Services and all these other providers that Oracle Cloud that allow you to deploy your technology without these servers, essentially. So what does that mean is it's highly available, right? Is if you had your own servers, you probably had to worry about some disaster recovery if they flooded or a tornado or hurricane, whatever the case may be. Is you don't have that overhead or that risk exposure anymore. With the cloud native, it's highly available, high uptime, and it can be deployed in a number of different ways. So a lot of benefits in that approach.
Well, and the availability for everything. Like there's not really any barriers.
Yeah, you got it. But, it'll talk about in just a minute here is, it allows you to do certain things with the architecture that you couldn't do in an on-prem and SaaS world. So if you allow me to just elaborate on that in just a minute, is if you had an on-premise software, you could customize it to however you would like because you were the only ones using that code base.
Right.
Well, when we went to SaaS-based software, it was everyone using the same code, but you couldn't customize it because everyone would get the same line of code. So there really wasn't level of customization. So you took it kind of both sides of the spectrum. The benefit of a cloud composable API first architecture is you get both. Is not only do you get the highly available base application available to you that everyone else has, you have the ability to extend it. You can have an API called into the base and extend it and customize it however you see fit. So you get the benefit of not only using the base of how it's generally available, but you also get to customize it just like if it was an on-prem solution.
And I would assume that gives that organization more agility and visibility in what they can or cannot do, right?
Exactly. Right. You need to be able to scale up and down with the market, right? Is if I have certain capabilities that I leverage in high peak season, I want those to be highly performative when and where I need them. Well, that's all good and well. But if you're in a monolithic system, it's always on and always available. You can't turn it off. And now you're running up these costs because you're supporting a service that you're not using, essentially.
Right.
Whereas on a cloud, you're only using the components that are being used at that time, which can lower your cost structure from a server perspective. So not only do you get the added benefit of cost savings, you get the benefit of high performing systems.
Well, and I think also too, we're living in a bit of a hybrid world. Right.
Yes.
And so some organizations are calling for people to go back on to on-site. Some aren't. There are a lot of teams that are off-site as well. And if you've got physical infrastructure that you have to maintain and have available to everybody, and if something happens, somebody needs to be there to do something about it, that can lead to some challenges, especially in a hybrid world, or even if they go on vacation.
Yeah, you got it. You nailed it right on the head. And the other promise that cloud native solutions provide is this whole thing about scheduled maintenance kind of just goes away, right?
Mm.
Is if you think about some of the SaaS and even on-prem solutions, you bring down the system to go through an upgrade. That's not
Mhm.
beneficial to anyone.
No, it's not.
If you're using a composable architecture in the cloud, you essentially are updating each component on a rolling schedule. So
Hmm.
the system is always up, and you're if you think about a brick sidewalk, so each brick would be a component within the architecture. I can take one brick out of the sidewalk and replace it with a replica, and you can still use the sidewalk. That's essentially how we're doing it with each component in the architecture. We're replacing it with a replica. We update that component and put it back into the sidewalk for continued usage. So what does that mean for the end user is I can use the system all the time, and we can perform maintenance. We can add new capabilities at any point in time, and it's essentially delivered to you behind the scenes. So if you wanted to leverage a new capability, you would simply just enable it because we provided it to you, and configure it however you'd like.
Hmm. Yeah, I think about my iPhone. I got a new iPhone just a couple of months ago, and they told me that I didn't have to turn it off, like ever. I was like, I don't have to turn it off ever. So I think of it that way. Now I want to give a shout out to Camille, Fred, Phil, Heather over on my personal LinkedIn. Now remember, we are just getting through some of the conversation. We're probably got another 10 minutes or so before we get to audience questions. If you have a question, you have a comment, anything that you want to put into the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, even Facebook, if you're over there and want to add a comment, please do so in the comments. If you're loving the conversation, we want to see some fire emojis too. Yeah, we'd love to see that. So send them on over. All right, so we can't have this conversation around technology without talking about AI,
Yeah.
automation, optimization. I know that it's a critical part of this, and I also know that it's something that is being talked about a lot right now.
Yes. Yes.
So, if I ask you how or where businesses are with AI and automation now, and where do you think they should be headed? I know there's a lot of different opinions out there right now. I listened to somebody a couple of months ago, or just about a month ago, saying that if you're not using AI for workflows within the next 18 months, you're going to be, in really, really big trouble. What is your opinion on this? Because, like I said, there's varying opinions.
Yeah, it's been my experience, at least the companies I've talked to, is there's a spectrum. You have the early adopters who are, all about new technology. They want to jump in the deep end and figure out how it goes. And then you have those that are in the shallow end of the pool that are kind of like wait and see. I'll dip my toe in, test the water and see how it goes. I'll let everyone else figure out the kinks along the way. So it's kind of your risk tolerance, I guess, is,
Mhm.
are you averse to risk or not? But I would say this, that although the technology is extremely powerful, it's getting easier and easier and easier to use. The whole point of these technologies is to improve the end user experience. And the end user is front and center when these technologies are being built. So if they were hard to use and did not provide value, then you wouldn't have the level of adoption that you're seeing today. Artificial intelligence is not new. It's been around for a long time, with the most being machine learning and those types of things. So it's stuff that people have grown into. But even with generative AI and agentic AI being the most common, is, there's a ton of value to be unlocked using these tools. And you shouldn't have to be afraid to test them out because there's no downside, essentially.
Yeah, and you say that AI has been around a long time. I was recently in the UK and we were watching, I think, the Legend channel, and Knight Rider was on there. And the car on the
Yeah.
show said that they wished that they had AI software for the car. And that was back in like, I don't even know. I don't even know
80s.
what the date was, but I think that was the 80s, right?
Yeah.
So it's so funny that you said that it's been around for a while. And I don't think people quite realize that it's been around for so long.
Yeah.
And then the other part of this too, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with TMS, but I was playing around with avatars the other day,
Mm.
and it created a video for me, and I sent it to a couple of people. I was like, so hey, what do you think of this? And they were like, it's great, but they couldn't really pinpoint what was wrong,
But
or what was not wrong, but what was different, right? And I think and the reason why I'm saying this is because I think there are people that are trying different things and trying new ways of doing things and looking at this and saying, this is how I can take this and innovate within my business and my supply chain and what I want to see in my TMS. Maybe not an avatar. I mean, maybe an avatar, maybe not an avatar, right? But people are playing around with this in their personal lives, in their professional lives, and I think it's interesting that we know sort of where that risk tolerance is and what exactly we want to use it for.
yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a good point in that people are becoming more familiar with these technologies through their personal life, right? And how they
Mhm.
interact, outside of the business. But that is educating them on how can I use this technology in my professional life, right?
Mhm.
Because it kind of is both applicable, right? Is you're generating things, you're generating content. There, you can generate an avatar, or you can generate a report. Those are
Right.
those are transferable skills. So it's those types of things. You may be using Chat GPT or some other type
Mhm.
of chat bot. Well, you can use those technologies in your business applications as well, right? It's the same experience. You're just working with a different data set. Instead of working with personal data, you're working with business data.
Yeah. 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 So, what do you think is the potential of this agentic AI when we think about the future of TMS solutions?
We're already seeing a lot in the way of automation. So, agentic AI is essentially the agent is performing tasks on behalf of the end user. So the benefit, of course, with an API first architecture is these agents can actually interact with the underlying APIs to tender loads, schedule appointments, those types of things. So a user doesn't have to manually navigate to these screens and click buttons and all these types of things. They can just, in natural language, tell these agents, go reschedule this delivery appointment for the next available based on the ETA. What I
Mhm.
just communicated to you was a natural language sentence in less in 10 seconds or 10 words. And then the agent went and did that, which would have taken, maybe 5 minutes to go reschedule a delivery appointment. You got to go call the people and, see what's available and those types of things. So you're dramatically going to improve the user experience because all of that mundane work, all that manual work essentially can be done by an agent in a fraction of the time. What that means for the human is I can go focus on more strategic things. I can go build relationships with my carriers. I can go improve relationships with my customers. Because keep in mind, what we talked about earlier, it's not all about cost, right? It's also
Right.
about service and relationships and those types of things. So,
Mhm. And also the cost to serve. Like if we think about the future of what we want it to look like, we want our costs to serve to go down too,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I want to let everybody know we just put the link in the comments for the road ahead, unlocking the future of transportation management. Go and grab your copy because it dives into a little bit more about what future ready TMS really means. And I want to give a shout out to Angela over on my personal LinkedIn as well. We got an absolutely and our first fire emoji, which I
Yes.
love. So people are really enjoying the conversation. So like I said, if you have any questions or comments, make sure to put them in there because we've only got a little bit left to talk about. But the next part that I want to talk about is unification. And we talked about this on a past episode. We've actually put all of the links into the comments for the past episodes. So you can go and check out the episode specifically on unification. But for everybody who hasn't listened to it, what does unification mean in this context?
Yeah, so unification, essentially you have a single platform with multiple workflows. So you have your transportation related workflows, you have your warehouse related workflows, and you have your yard related workflows. Those are not separate applications. And what you and I had talked about before was, in a siloed world, you would have a system that does warehouse, you would have a system that does transportation, and you need to integrate those systems to lob information back and forth to each other. And we talked about all the drawbacks of that. In a unified world, it's all the same platform. So the benefit, of course, is a shipment in TMS is the exact same shipment in WMS. So if I'm executing a shipment, this shipment is potentially late, my warehouse users already know the ETA of that shipment because they see the exact same shipment that my load planners see. If I need to reschedule a delivery appointment for that shipment, I'm rescheduling that appointment on my warehouse for my DC. Well, if you extend that even further into the warehouse, if we knew this shipment was going to be late, maybe I can divert those labor resources to go work on other things so they're not standing idle. And then when this actually does deliver later in the day, I can reallocate them to do the work.
Yeah. Well, it also gives everybody a bit more of a sense of empowerment and maybe a little bit more control over their day as well. Right? Because there's nothing worse than having to stand around and, really wanting to do something and wanting to do some meaningful work and make an impact with your day. And you really don't have anywhere to go because they're not working hand in hand. But I think the other most important thing that we should probably talk about is the competitive advantage that this creates. And the reason why I say that is every organization is looking for that. And most of them are looking to their supply chain teams and leaders to make that happen. So talk to us about how that can help them with that advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we already talked about the disadvantage of having the siloed applications, the cost, the overhead, the lack of visibility. Well, completely inverted, right? Is you get visibility, you get the unification, you get the shared data, you get the collaboration that you need with your business partners. I'll give you one example. Is in a siloed world, a TMS would take orders, build them into shipments, and then go hand it over to the warehouse to perform the loading. Well, the TMS assumed that it was a certain weight, a certain volume, and so on and so forth. It made assumptions. Well, in reality, those assumptions fall down because I might have overbuilt the trailer and now I have to leave pallets behind. Or I would have underbuilt the trailer and now I have empty space on the trailer. So I'm creating inefficiencies. Well, that's not true in a unified world because what I'm doing is I'm taking those orders that are shared between TM and WM. I know exactly how these orders are going to be built on pallets, how these pallets are going to be built into trailers, how these stop sequences are going to be performed based on my routing. So there goes away all those left behind pallets, and there goes away all of those underutilized trailers where you're not maximizing utilization.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can totally see that. I mean, at the end of the day, with capacity where it's at today, you want to make sure that you're using every single space that you can on that particular truck. You also want to make sure that, if you're sending out all of your e-commerce orders, that you're not leaving anything behind because that affects, your consumer and whether they're going to buy from you again. And so you want to make sure that everything is unified, but also, it's unified on the downstream, but you also want it to be unified on the upstream because you want that information to be traveling back and forth. So if there is some customer service challenges, they know ahead of time, maybe, right? Or they can communicate it to the customer before the customer calls them and finds out what happened.
Exactly. That goes back to the customer relationship, customer satisfaction that we had talked about earlier, which kind of falls apart in a siloed world as you're sharing all of that status information upstream with your store managers and your customer
Yeah.
service reps and those types of things. And, even if you're going through demand planning, is
Mhm.
if you're building future orders or projected orders, why can't you share those forecasted orders with TMS to secure capacity in advance with your
Mhm.
carrier partners? And then when the actual order drops, you just replace the forecasted order with the actual order.
Mhm.
So a lot of benefit.
So true. Well, the last thing I want to talk about is sustainability. I know it's been on everybody's radar for a while, and actually we asked a question, I think it was this week on Thoughts and Coffee, we talked about it. And sustainability was still at the top of the list when they were talking about some of the top priorities for their supply chains. I have been feeling like lately it's taken a bit of a backseat to some of the other disruptions. So it was nice to see those poll results.
Yeah.
But I think we really need to, and considering the poll results, we need to get back into embedding sustainability really into everything that we do, or making it a bit of a mindset shift. So talk to me about what the biggest sustainability challenges you see your customers are grappling with, like right now.
Yeah, so you kind of already alluded to the change in focus, right? Is if
Yeah.
I have a fire right in front of me, I kind of need to put that
Right?
out before, I go and do this other things. But, there's other things at play here too. One of the things is availability of data, right? It, Sometimes it's not easily accessible, like
Mhm.
how efficient a 20-year-old diesel truck is. It can vary widely from state to state. But I would say the other thing that is challenging is the rules are changing.
Yeah.
There's regulation changing almost every 6 to 12 months. There's more regulatory pressure on reporting. There's certainly much more pressure on the European side than we've seen here in North America. But it's when you have the goalpost moving, it's kind of hard to keep up as well in terms of what you need to report, what data you need to report, how much you need to report, and those types of things.
Well, and you kind of wonder why there's so much fatigue, but you just pointed it out, right?
Yeah.
When the goalpost is moving and people don't feel like they can actually make an impact, or at least hit one goal out of several, it gets a little bit tiring, especially when there's disruptions and fires that they need to put out. So talk to me about like the cloud native unified solution. Does that help organizations, supply chain teams better understand some of the sustainability demands and the pressure that they're under, and how to tackle them? How does
Yeah.
that fit into the equation?
Well, so TMS in of itself naturally lends itself to more sustainability initiatives because TMS is trying to create the most efficient route, right?
Mhm.
If you're driving out of route and you're doing stop sequences that don't make sense, you're not trying to do that because it's going to cost you more. But naturally, if you create a good route with good stop sequence, you're not only lowering your costs, you're actually being more sustainable. The same thing that we said about trailer utilization is the more full we can make a trailer, the more sustainable it is because it's less shipments that we need to perform the same amount of deliveries.
Mhm.
So those things just naturally play well. But the other thing, at least on the warehouse side, is we're starting to see more uptick in lights out operations. I mean, there's more and more warehouses out there that are, I guess, humanless. They
Mhm.
effectively run on conveyors and robotics and those types of things. And what that allows those warehouses to do is turn off the lights because
Mhm.
robots don't need to see, and you can change the temperature. You don't need to run air conditioning 24/7 in the desert because robots don't care what temperature it is either. So those are things that certainly help from an efficiency perspective.
I still feel like with the lights out, whether it's robots or not, I still have a feeling they might run into each other. I don't know. I don't know enough about robots to know that. But what you're describing is sustainability without even really having to think too hard about it, which is what we need.
Simplify it. you know
Simplify it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
is the simpler you can make it, the easier it is to do, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the way that we have to think about it, and we have to make it so that we're not having to think too hard about what it is that we have to do, or if we have to change workflows or processes that are already working. Nobody wants to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that at all. So when you think about, embedding sustainability into every transportation decision that they make, how do we make that simple? I know you were talking about the routing decisions. Is there any other ways that we can sort of make it a way that, it's just done without thinking too hard about it?
Yeah, well, not only can you do it in terms of automation, but if you're thinking about the user experience and the user is actually making decisions, you need to provide them data right then and there.
Hmm.
So the classic example is when you're going to schedule a flight and you're going to book a flight, you get
Hmm.
to see the CO2 emissions for each flight, and you can choose a flight that's more sustainable, essentially. Well, the same thing can be said in TMS world is if I'm going to build and route a shipment, I can get that information right then and there. So if I had a certain CO2 calculation for a truckload shipment versus had it been intermodal, I'm providing that data right then and there to the user to make a more informed decision. Maybe I had more time to deliver this product and I want to switch it to intermodal. I have that opportunity to make that decision on the fly.
But not only that, you can now tailor it to the customer. So a lot of times, sustainability initiatives are driven by that customer and the goals that they particularly need to make in sustainability. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
you obviously have to provide the reporting. And so if you can tailor make a route to the customer based on the sustainability needs and the reporting that they're going to need from you down the road, I mean, that's gold. I like that one.
yeah, and then you can better negotiate delivery windows and those types of things. Because if they
Mhm.
don't need the product until next week, you can choose a more sustainable solution. If they need
Yeah.
the product tomorrow, it's probably not going to be a sustainable solution.
Well, and think about the conversation around, having to redo contracts, let's say. And
Mhm.
you bring that type of information to the table, and the fact that, well, we hit your sustainability goals because we were able to do this and change routes and do all of this. And that's some real value add to the goals that you have moving forward. And so when we renegotiate a contract, maybe the pricing's going up a little bit and you can showcase some more value in other areas.
And bringing it full circle is, have all these technologies do the mundane, the repetitive things, just automate the things that don't need strategic focus. The
Mhm.
things that we just talked about, negotiating with your vendors, negotiating with your customers and your carriers and building those relationships, those are strategic. And it's the combination of bringing all these together that which is going to add the most value.
So true. So true. All right. Now it's time for audience questions. And we've got one here. So somebody says we're on a 7-year-old TMS. What's the first measurable win we should expect in 90 days if we modernize?
Yeah. Well, one of them would be visibility. Some of the older TMSs in the world today just, they struggle to keep up with real time information. So,
Mhm.
one of the major benefits of a modern TMS is you get access to not only data in a more real time fashion, it's most likely more clean data and more accurate data as well. But even the modern architectures and modern TMSs, they come with out of the box integrations. So, out of the box integrations to your carriers, out of the box integrations to visibility providers, to ERP systems. So, you'll get a natural benefit with that out of the box integration as well.
I love that question, right? Because everybody wants some of those quick wins and they definitely want to show some of those quick wins. And so you're managing expectations with that, which I love. All right.
Right.
There's another question here. What KPI targets are you seeing across shippers that are actually achieved post go live and in what time frame?
Yeah, it kind of depends on where you're coming from. If you're coming from Excel and phone calls, there's a ton of opportunity for not only cost savings and visibility and all the good things. If you're coming from another TMS or an older TMS, is some of the things that you can expect are cost savings because you're building better routes. You're negotiating better contracts with your carriers, so you can reduce your contract rates. you're giving more lead time and visibility to your carriers, so you're not having to go to spot market so often. And those are just on the cost side. The other side we had talked about was service, right? Is you're going to provide a higher level of service to your customers because you'll be able to provide them, more accurate ETAs on, when they can expect their products to arrive and deliver. The self-service appointment scheduling is just so many things that, you can expect post go live.
Yeah. Great question. Okay. Last question. If anybody has any other questions, make sure to put them in the comments because we want to get to those before we go. Biggest hidden risk you see in migration. So people, data, carrier onboarding. How do you address that?
Yeah, I guess the one that I run into the most often is bad data.
Still
Still
in 2025, we're about to go
yes.
into 2026.
Yeah, data is the name of the game. And the problem is nobody wants to clean up their data. It takes a long time. It's tedious. The time you update it is out of date and those types of things. So, by the way, there's tools to help you clean up and update your data. So would recommend that. But that seems to be the challenge here today.
The biggest challenge is cleaning up the data,
Yeah.
which is really hard to fathom because we've been talking about it for so long. Maybe people think it's a destination, not a journey, because I feel like you're constantly having to clean it up. It's not like it's going to be cleaned up one day and like it's going to be clean for the rest of your life.
No, you need to continually keep it up to date.
Yeah, maybe that's the struggle. There could be some fatigue around cleaning up your data. All right, last question for you. What do you want to leave the audience with? What are your big takeaways from our discussion today?
Yeah, so kind of reflecting back on what we spoke about, start first by understanding your pain points, right? Is if you don't have a baseline to work with today, you really don't know where your opportunities lie. You might have the ability to go after some quick wins. You might have the ability to, work on some larger initiatives that add a ton of value. But, understanding your pain points today will give you at least a starting point on what you can improve for tomorrow.
Absolutely. Well, so that's all the time we have today. And I really want to appreciate everybody for joining us. A big thank you to Bryant for another amazing conversation. I mean, transportation management is critical to success, but it's really very complicated, as you can see from the discussions that we've had today. And businesses are struggling. One of the things that Bryant just said was that they're struggling with cleaning their data. So to hear you talk about helping supply chain transportation leaders overcome the limitations of legacy systems, gain real-time visibility, reduce costs, and prepare for future supply chain disruptions and demands. I mean, it's really what all the businesses want to hear. And you put it in a way that we can really resonate with and understand and put it into practical, actionable steps. And so I'm excited to see the impact that, Bryant, yourself, Manhattan is going to make. Again, if you didn't grab your copy of The Road Ahead, Unlocking the Future of Transportation Management, the link is in the comments right now. Head over there, grab your copy. And if you want to find out how you can banish your outdated TMS and prepare for the future with AI-powered cloud-native unified solutions, head over to Manhattan's website, which is MANH.com. So, Bryant, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Sarah. Always a great time, and looking forward to our next conversation.